conduct of business if participants speak only when invited. Please mute microphones and turn off the video feed when you are not speaking. Members of the public are welcome to view the proceedings, but should not make contributions at this meeting. Please remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your video feed when it is your turn to speak. Speak clearly and slowly into your microphone. Anyone wishing to speak should indicate using the raise your hand button on Microsoft Teams. I will invite people to speak at the appropriate time. I ask for everyone's patience with the use of the technology and apologise in advance if we experience any unforeseen difficulties, which we shall try to resolve, but we're all going okay so far. So we'll go on to the agenda items. Apologies for absence, none received. Appointment of any substitute members, none. Any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct? None. To confirm the minutes of the meeting on 4th of March 2020. We're all happy with those? All received a copy?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Review of planning obligations, amendments to process and spend for Section 106 agreements and community infrastructure levy neighbourhood funding. And we have officers to make a verbal presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to clarify, obviously the heading of that report before included Section 106, that was ultimately removed from that and signed off as a decision sheet. So this report is primarily concerned with community infrastructure levy, but any questions I can try and answer for you. So obviously I hope you've all read the report or have the report available. If not, I can share it on the screen, just let me know. But otherwise I'll begin. So community infrastructure levies, a mechanism whereby tariffs can be applied to certain developments and in certain areas within our borough. It's essentially a financial mitigation to impact for the impact of developments that we have on infrastructure and on communities. SIL spend is generally split between capital and revenue infrastructure and neighbourhood funding. This report intends to address the issues specifically around neighbourhood funding, which is the smaller element financially. So when we have SIL monies available for infrastructure, the spend can be on infrastructure projects. That includes provision, improvement, replacement, operation, or maintenance of infrastructure, or rather vaguely, anything else that's concerned with addressing the demand that a development places on an area. That's not very helpful, I don't think, but that's what the legislation says. Despite efforts, we haven't yet managed to allocate any funding in the neighbourhood funding from the neighbourhood funding pot. We have brought in £126,000 since the SIL charge was applicable in late 2015. So those efforts have been fruitless, I think, for a number of reasons. One, I think the lack of knowledge about those funds being available to the general community is one issue. And also some confusion potentially between the difference between SIL and community forum funding that's available. And then thirdly, I think an issue around potentially the monies that are available and how inequitable they are, which I'll come on to. So on paragraph 12 of the report, there's a table that shows the breakdown of the monies that we have available per community forum at the moment. You will see, or hopefully you have seen, that they are vastly different depending on which community forum you are looking at. So, for example, there are 3 forums that have less than £1,000. One of those has got nothing, which is Belvale, Hayley Green and Cradley. Whereas you've got 3 community forum areas which have got over 20,000. In fact, one of those, which is Norton, Stourbridge, Pedmore, etc., is 50,000 plus. So there's a real disparity amongst the way the funding is available for spend. That's the issue I think we really want to try and address, and the main reason for our report. So the guidance talks about spending these monies locally, but it doesn't define what locally means, and therefore it's up to each individual council as to how they define what local is. and each council's taking a different view. Some councils, particularly those London boroughs, will say the whole area is local, and that's something that we are potentially proposing here in Dudley. That allows the money to be spread more equally. So we have 2 proposals in the report. The first one is that there's one option is that you distribute the funds that are available, the 126,000, equally amongst the community forums, notwithstanding the need to go by awards. So those community forums that got 3 awards would have a little bit more than those that got 2, but an equal distribution. And then the quite laborious process would take place whereby officers from the planning service would assist community forums in deciding which projects and schemes they wish to fund with the money they have. The difficulty with that is, of course, you'll have a similar situation as to what we have now, in that you need to make sure the bids come in your areas. That's difficult as it is. Then you need to have a scoring mechanism so that it's transparent and fair. And there needs to be a way of actually doing that from an admin point of view. So that is one of the options, and it does overcome the lack of equity financially, but I don't think it's a great option. Which brings me on to option 2. Option 2, we're calling online fundraising platform. This is our preferred option as officers, and what we're recommending to you at the moment. This was a process that was pioneered by Plymouth City Council, and it got national awards, and is very well received amongst the community and members. And now it's been taken up by a number of other authorities nationally. Effectively, what happens is that Plymouth, and this is something we would try to do, is create a web page on a crowdfunding platform. There's a number of different companies that do this. The project then would be on that page, and once people make donations and pledges to that project, once it reaches 25% of its total aim, then we as a council could decide to pledge money towards that project out of the SIL money that's available. We are proposing at the moment that would be up to 50% of the overall monies required, and that would leave 25% to be funded by the public or sponsors or additional funding streams. It's an all or nothing model, that's what they call it, which means that if they don't manage to get all the money, then none of it is actually spent and the project doesn't succeed, and therefore the risk is very low to the council. There's a number, I can talk about the technicalities if questions are needed later rather than bore you with the details now, but there is a very stringent process that's been agreed by Plymouth and been refined that we would follow around the legal position in terms of signing terms and conditions, etc., etc. The pros of that, though, are that effectively the website, the web company would administrate this, so we wouldn't have to spend money on administrating the process or officer time, although we'd have to pay a fee to them out of our admin, and that we would basically become another pledger. But it does have big benefits in terms of unlocking additional funding. As I said, sometimes private sponsors and the public will get behind these schemes and brings in money that otherwise hasn't been the case. And it's got a very wide reach, and it's very transparent because everyone can see which projects are out there and what we're bidding on. It's also really good for making the community feel that they're involved and they're leading the process, because effectively they're almost making their own decisions in terms of which schemes get funded and which don't. So it's very collaborative in nature. And I think another big plus is that this is a continuous process, because obviously people can put these on at any time and get funding any time, whereas the current process and even the option 1 process would be very much about opening windows and having bidding processes and times throughout the year when you can make that bid. If you're unsuccessful, then you have to wait until the next window of bidding opens. So I'm happy to obviously answer questions, but that's the summary of what we're trying to achieve. And we very much would value your comments and your views on that, so that we can ultimately take a proposal forward to Cabinet probably in September, with a proposal that's obviously had your comments and hopefully endorsements. So if I can give back to you, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions or comments so far? Councillor Sahota. We've lost your microphone. There we go. No, still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I didn't want to be first, but obviously I am first. Okay, thank you for the nice summary, Carl. Right now, obviously, I have got a bit of background in this. I have sort of audited grants and also worked in community development, right? And one of the things I want to pick up initially, I've got quite a few comments to make, so hopefully just bear with us. We've said obviously we struggle to actually fund the funding we've got at the moment, right? Then I think we as a council then need to ask what our community development officers do in the wards. We have a team of community development officers who work in the patch, who work in the communities, who work with community groups. Surely they should be there trying to work up projects for their communities. So that's one concern I've got, right? And I think the other concern I've got here now, I think this concept of crowdfunding, to me, it does seem like a bit sort of privatising council's obligations to spend public money privately. Now, I think if we go down this route, I have got big concerns because Dudley is nothing compared to the examples you've used here, which I'll come to later point. I think if we go down this route, it will benefit those articulate groups in the borough who know how to apply for funding, who've got experience applying for funding in the past. And I think where our communities will lose out is in the deprived parts of the borough where they haven't got the infrastructure, where the money is needed. So how will what are reassurances that things are not going to get worse there? So there are big concerns there. And I think the other thing, my next point is you raised the example of Plymouth. It seems to be the beacon of excellence. Now, how can you compare Plymouth's social profile to Dudley's profile, right? I've also done some analysis on Hammersmith and Fulham. Again, it's a London borough, but they've only got one neighbourhood in the whole of the borough that is actually deprived. You compare it to Dudley, where it's all red in the central part of Dudley. I've got the deprivation map here, which I can share with the rest of the committee. We've got loads of wards which are deprived. So, there are some concerns here. And then, how can we compare it to Crawley? Crawley and Dudley, totally different authorities, 300,000 compared to 100,000. Have any other metropolitan authorities in the West Midlands, Greater Manchester, or anywhere else gone down this route, right? And I think the other thing that's concerning me with this report is the quality impact assessment, which we refer to in this report. Now, I don't want to sort of go over the scrap record. The whole idea of the quality impact assessment for all council reports was to basically make sure that councils undergo their quality impact assessment obligations to make sure key sections of the community are not sort of any policy changes do not affect those communities. Now, there's nothing in this report that reassures me as a councillor that those key criteria in our community who need the quality impact assessment for their reasons, how they're going to be protected, right? And my next point is we refer to the health and well-being section of this report on page 11. Schemes that may be brought forward as a result of proposed changes are likely to have a positive impact on the health and well-being. Now, most of those issues are in our deprived wards, right? So how will this crowdfunding benefit those communities in the deprived wards whose health and well-being is already at a negative implication? So how will we make sure that the money that we've got here that we're looking to propose through crowdfunding will actually go into the deprived wards of Dudley? Now, where's the evidence from your experience that will actually happen? Plymouth, I can't see why Plymouth is being used as an example. Fulham can't be used as an example. They've already got one deprived neighbourhood in the whole of the Fulham and Hammersmith borough. So these are the concerns, and I think, and the key thing, the final key point I'd like to make here, if we go down this crowdfunding route, it is privatisation, and we're losing local accountability. So so those are the key concerns I have, Carl. Obviously, in terms of where we're going with this sort of direction of travel for this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, would you like me to come back or not?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor, so there's quite a few points there. Hopefully I can go through them. Yeah, so I understand if I start with the development, the current situation is that when we first tried to do this, we used community forums because obviously that was a logical route to use. And I don't think the community development officers were totally aware either of these. I mean, they're not planners, they're not within the planning service, they're in the council. So that is one means whereby we can improve the message out there and help communities understand this money is available and how to access it. But that does lead me on to another point you made about kind of who it might disadvantage. What we're finding right now, both in the neighbourhood funding, but also the capital revenue funding, which is a larger pot that we've been spending quite well, is that it is those very well organised, articulate, as you said, groups who know how to put funding bids in, who know how to kind of access the system and know where to look, who are being allocated the money because they're making the bids. We're just then checking them competitively against one another to make sure they meet the criteria. So at the moment, we've got a big issue, and I think that's where we're coming from. We agree totally with you that at the moment, there's large areas of the borough who aren't either able to access it or knowing of it. And the worst point is the point I made before, that even if they are able to, there's not enough money there in their pot to actually make a scheme viable or useful, etc. So we want to overcome that. How crowdfunding does it? Obviously, Plymouth, Hammersmith, and Fulham, etc., aren't exactly the same as Dudley. The reason we've gone to those is that Plymouth were the pioneers. They started this, and they've been very well lauded for it. We've had good contacts and conversation with them to make sure that we understand the processes and how they work, and the pros and cons. And they are adamant that those deprived areas are still able, and actually more able, to access the fund because most people now can use the internet. You don't have to put that bid in yourself. Anybody, any community leader, any community organisation, and I suppose a councillor can put that project online. And once that project's online and there's a description, understanding of what that project is, that is all that's needed from the community initially to get that on there. Then obviously that we need the reason that Plymouth and we are proposing that 25% of the overall fund needs to be hit is that's the way to demonstrate, which is a requirement of the policy, that the community is behind that scheme. If we pledge the money straight away, then as officers we'd be making that decision, which it doesn't seem to be appropriate. Also, we don't have to pledge on schemes just because they hit 25%. What we would do is we would get the scheme, we'd look at the officers at the council would look at the scheme, we'd identify the schemes that were appropriate and meet the criteria, and then I think the way that Plymouth do it and the way we propose is they have a consultation process with, for example, the cabinet member to check whether or not he or she is happy for us to pledge X amount of pounds towards that project. So we're not in any way required to do that, and that's how we can quality control it and not give up the fact that we're making decisions on these projects. I'm just going to go through all your points. Health and well-being. Yeah, I think it's a repetition of my point, really. I think at the moment those wards and those communities are not being catered for, and the unfortunate thing about SIL is that our charge areas are dictated by economics, so we don't charge SIL in most of the borough because if we did, developments wouldn't get built because they wouldn't be viable. So this gap is going to continue to grow between the kind of the haves and have-nots. But my view and the view of officers that you are still having developments in those deprived areas, but they're not paying any SIL. So it's a way of saying, well, hold on, something that happens over there in the adjacent ward or the adjacent community forum is impacting on our community, and we can access those funds. I think the key for us, going back to your main point, is around making sure that we very well articulate and advertise the money that's available and how people can access it. And as officers of the council, we need to make sure that we support communities in making those bids, putting things online. I don't think it's even inappropriate that we could put those projects online for them if they put them to us. So we don't want to isolate any part of the community. We want to assist them in getting their projects online so that everyone can see what they are, what they're doing, and get that backing behind it. I'm not sure if I've covered all your points, Councillor. If I haven't, I apologise. Please come back to me, but I tried to make some notes. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Are you happy with that, Councillor Finch?
Icon, not really. Which one you got, the chair?
Yes, sorry.
Talk to me, okay.
Yourself.
What it is, I heard what Carl said. He hasn't persuaded me that he'll integrate the community, all the councillors in this project he's put forward. And what he's done, he hasn't given us any other options. He's just said, yeah, you like that. He hasn't said, we've gone up north and we checked up there what they've done and whatever. This system, what we've got now, doesn't work because officers are not related to councillors and the community in the past. It's the officers what has caused this problem, not the council, the officers. If the officers had done the job what they was paid to do, we would be in this mess and looking for other projects. That's why, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One point that I've just thought of whilst listening to your presentation is it seems to be a bit complicated. Can we keep it simple? Can we simplify it a bit more? It seems we've got to keep this simple to engage the councillors so that they want to be part of it and want to put the bids in place, as long as it's an easy job to do. And also that we don't lose the money, because there is a potential of losing the money if we don't bid for it in time. Is that right?
Well, not in terms of SIL. That was section 106. You're correct. We would have lost the money if we don't spend it. With SIL, it sits there, but it's not working obviously for the community at that point. So I think it's a fair point. Can I just come back, if you don't mind, Chair, on the point that I think I missed from Councillor Hoter as well, but just Councillor Finch mentioned. We obviously we've got quite a small cohort of councils to check on, so no one else in the West Midlands is doing this. I accept that we're ahead of them in my view, but we've got a smaller sample to go on, so we're trying to do something that's quite innovative and we hope would benefit the community. In terms of the officers' role in this, we are restrained by the regulations. When we first brought these spend to yourselves, when I say yourselves, the cabinet back in 2015, we had a process in place which we thought would work. And in fact, the capital and revenue side of that works very well. We have spent well over £500,000 or pledged over £500,000 to projects on capital and revenue. So this is an isolated area. And I do think rather than obviously I accept criticism of officers where warranted, but the fact that the money isn't available in the wards where projects need to take place is a key factor in this. And that's because as a council, we decided 5 years ago that we were going to split it between the community forums. I think, with a bit of foresight now, we realise that wasn't a bit of hindsight. Sorry, it wasn't the best approach because of the fact that developments don't charge in there. We were quite an early adopter of SIL, and actually not many councils at that point had it. So we were really kind of anticipating without much direction as to how it would go. So I certainly accept any criticism of officers when it comes around to publicising and trying to get the message out to communities. But that is quite difficult. And what I didn't want us to do as officers is kind of encourage communities to make bids in areas where there is no money. I think that's the worst thing you can do, and actually kind of raise hopes. What I hope this will do in terms of is giving people the opportunity to access that money. And my very final point is we've given two options in this report. We prefer option 2, the more radical option, the more innovative one. But option 1 is available, and option 1 is about at least agreeing that we can spend that money more fairly across the borough, even if the process is still the more traditional process of bidding. Sorry, Chair, I'll let you come back in. I apologise.
No, that's fine.
Please.
Yes.
Back on that call. You just made a statement there that, we as councillors over the years have been contacting the offices with projects in our ward. Every time we've gone over years and been turned down or said, that can't happen, there's no money there, there's nothing. But you never respond back to us. You never get back to the communities. And you're saying we shouldn't say, the officers are doing the job right. They am doing the job right. They're stopping us getting our communities up and running. And that's our problem. Thank you, Chair.
Following on from that, Councillor Finch, would it benefit if we had a presentation by Carmela for the whole of the councillors before the cabinet meeting in September? Would that help?
I think that'd be adequate, Chair.
I think that we've just been given the two options here, and maybe if those two and others or potential thoughts are conveyed to the councillors in a meeting or presentation meeting before cabinet meeting, then we might get some other ideas and more constructive feedback.
Yeah, and I hope we can get around the table in September.
Okay. Helen?
just a very brief comment. I was just thinking, if we're going to meet and come back around the table again, perhaps that's an opportunity for Carl and myself and other officers to provide you with information where others have used this to demonstrate that there is an ability for councillors to have a role and communities to be involved in it, to be inclusive.
Yep, great, thank you. Councillor Sahota. Can you turn your microphone on?
Can you hear me now then?
Yes.
I think I just could come back to obviously Carl's reply to a couple of points. Obviously, he said other local authorities haven't, in the West Midlands, haven't sort of adopted this, and we're, in a sense, are the innovators. The other side of that coin could be that they're a bit more cautious in terms of whether it is the right way to go forward to sort of make sure there's a better spread of this SIL funding within the wards. And I think the other 2 points I'd like to make now, Carl, me and Carl already both all agree. I think everybody agrees in the committee. You do tend to get those same groups at forums who make the bids, etc. There's nothing in this new proposals that will safeguard that they will then continue to cream off the funding, going forward. And the third point is we do need to do some measurement on where this funding will go in terms of the wards, the deprivation, etc. For example, after 12 months, if we then find that the same active community groups are accessing this new money through crowdfunding as they did through the community forum, and nothing has changed, and there's still no project coming forward in the deprived wards where it's needed, then I think as a council, responsible council and a committee, will need to take stock of whether this is the right way forward.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments before we move on? Can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Without prolonging the debate, can I just come back to Councillor Sahota and say that if the council would like to trial this, then the proposal might be that you do trial it for 12 months, and then we can do the research that you have just suggested. There are options to do that if that's one of the options that council want us to explore. Thank you.
No, Chair, I don't think so. We'll wait till September, then we'll make decisions.
Okay. We'll have a think before September, and obviously we've just heard about it now, and we can think of it more thoroughly. And if we get any more ideas, obviously we can chat about it up till then. I think we've satisfied the recommendations for this issue, so we'll move on to Annual Scrutiny Programme 2020 to 21. Any questions or comments on this issue? We all happy? What is that? Gone on. So we've noted the annual report, which will be submitted at full council on the 23rd of July. Are we all happy with that? And following that, we'll confirm the future programme of the scrutiny business for this committee following the meeting of the council on the 23rd of July. And also that the arrangements for a scrutiny review of the Dudley MBC and partner response to the coronavirus pandemic, as set out in paragraphs 9 to 13, be noted. Are you all happy with that?
All right.
Yeah. Okay. No comments. So we move the recommendations in this report for the annual scrutiny programme. Any questions under procedural 11.8? And there's none of those. So we'll end it there. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll close the meeting 18:28.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Come on, Margaret.
Thank you.